Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor, your podcast and source for all things Rhode Island FC. I'm your host, Matt Intrican, coming to you on Thursday, November 14th. RIFC accomplishes a second fearless win against the number one seed that sees Louisville City FC exit the Eastern Conference in the semifinals for the first time in their club's history. RIFC now advances to take on the Charleston Battery next in the Eastern Conference Final. Can this club go the distance and make an appearance in the USL Cup Final? We're going to have to find out as co-host Jason Carey joins us. And a little later, we're going to have Andrew and Connor from the Howlers and Holy City Sound Off podcast joining us. But for now, Jason, how is it going, my friend?
Doing pretty good. We're in the Eastern Conference Finals.
We're playing with house money at this point. That's something that the club, that is something the coach, that's what some of the fans have been saying is at this point, we've made it farther, I think, than anyone really gave us credit. Not to say that it wasn't deserved, but I think if you look back to the beginning of the year, you had people saying, let's just be a playoff contender. And then you had others like, let's win the whole thing. And right now we're perfectly deadlined right in the middle of that. So we are exactly where I think we want to be, minus maybe a home playoff game, which we'll talk about in a little bit because there's been some news that's developed this week around that. But before we even talk about the Mount High like feeling that we've been going through, I think we got to start with the negatives, right? You got to get the bad stuff out of the way right at the beginning.
Yeah, it's unfortunate news.
And it just keeps piling on. So if you've been living under a rock, per Tom Bogart earlier this week, Memphis 901 FC has transferred their USL Championship franchise rights to UC Santa Barbara. And I'm calling them UC Santa Barbara because that's where they're going to be playing, folks. But they'll be transferring it to the Santa Barbara Sky per sources. Memphis will not play in 2025, and neither will the Santa Barbara Sky. They'll be joining in the USL Championship in 2026 after the league has approved it. And he went on a later tweet and said that this was strictly about the stadium option not being viable, not being there. Memphis 901 FC had been looking for a permanent home. Had been trying to get some grants through some government funding, through some city funding, and a lot of those things fell kind of just flat when it mattered in the dying seconds of getting some bills passed across the legislation. You hate to see it. I wrote that this was a robbery. I don't like when a club locks the doors, after the season's over in the middle of the night. It's very RGV Toros vibey. And, when you compare what the San Diego Loyal did last year to say, hey, like we've got this celebration, we've got this like 6-week wake, if you will, come party with us, come send us out with a bang, versus, hey, we made the playoffs like 4 seasons in a row. How are we going to reward the fans? We're going to lock the doors while no one's looking.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I mean, disappointing to say the least. I think this just kind of shows that no stadium, no party. There's definitely some work to be done here from the league in terms of like how to protect these teams. We can't keep having them disappearing. We could honestly probably have a podcast just talking about this, and maybe we will at some point. But like, I don't want to get too far into it because, we have some more exciting stuff right now to talk about going on with RIFC.
Well, I mean, we have some exciting, but we also have some sad stuff to pile on. Again, this is fair, getting it all out of the way, because in addition to Memphis 901 FC being announced as being kind of sunset, if you will, the league also officially released a statement just earlier today that in the USL 1 side of things, the Colorado Hailstorm, which have been on life support, they've been in administration from the league as they've lost a lot of their ownership group and the direction at that club. They have terminated the franchise rights at the Hailstorm. The Hailstorm now, I think, in a lawsuit around challenging that, which if you've been again, we're not an MLS podcast, but also not a USL 1 podcast. They've been struggling to stay afloat. And then also, though, they just parted ways with Central Valley Fuego in the USL 1 as well. So Jermaine Jones no longer a part of USL glory right now.
Yeah, those are some interesting ones because when we look at NOCO, we had heard earlier on in the season that they've been having some trouble and that USL stepped in to start paying their bills. when it comes to a lawsuit like that, I kind of want to give it some time and kind of wait and see what happens, because on one hand, you could also look at, well, if USL is coming in and paying your players, I mean, maybe it's just some incompetence in terms of running your team. I don't know. And I also at the same time want to give them like their fair chance, because maybe they were given some sort of promises or commitments from the USL that didn't line up, and thought that maybe they were going to receive some sort of funding. Like, we just don't know what's actually going on there. And unfortunately, with a lot of these legal cases, we kind of never will.
We'll never know.
So we're just speculating.
We still don't know what Bruce Arena said to get kicked out of the Revolution.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever will. There's apparently a book coming out. It's something like, if I did say it, and people like, say what?
So we got to move on. But I want to focus on the last aspect of at least Memphis going away, which, by the way, we will talk about Santa Barbara Sky, because they were barely struggling to become a USL 1 team, could barely get that across the finish line. I don't know that Santa Barbara is the hottest sports market to embed yourself, but another podcast, another time. For now, I want to talk about what you see on the screen, and that is, what do you do with only the 25 teams that, as of right now, will be in USL Championship next season? We have Lexington coming online. We have Brooklyn FC coming online. Some more teams potentially joining, maybe some more teams potentially dropping. There's still rumors of other teams that have been named this season that have not yet fallen when it comes to the postseason saying goodbye from an operations standpoint. But if you look at this map as it is today, there were a lot of people trying to draw the 37th parallel, how to split this left to right. With 25 teams, it's really hard. And primarily the two darlings of the league that make it really difficult is FC Tulsa, and more specifically Birmingham Legion, because if you were to put this in a 12 and 13 team conference and lopside it, Birmingham Legion still has to go. And the fact that you would tell me a team in Alabama goes to the West, I mean, we could say that maybe some of Memphis 901's operational cost failures this year was the larger travel budget that they had to occur going to all these Western teams. So I had some fun with it. I came up with a 5-division conference, and you tell me if you think this sounds right, or if you've seen this already, so maybe you've got a different idea. But at least with a 5-team conference, it lets you play against local regional teams, with the home and away leg, and then you play 2 of those divisions all away so that there's the parity, and then the other 2 you play all at home, so they would flip and reciprocate. Now, granted, it's kind of like what we have today, except the conferences are larger. There's obviously more teams. But what this does is it actually also allows you to limit the game format down to 28 games versus the 34 that get played today. I'm curious, what do you think of this? Because there's been talks about the Jägermeister Cup. There's been talking about an expansion across the pyramid of like a knockout style tournament. How does this shape out in your eyes?
I mean, Jägermeister Cup, let's go. Are you kidding me? I mean, I do like the idea of compacting the league here a little bit and creating some parity where it can exist. I think it's important to really foster those local rivalries, right? That's how you really like grow and engage fan bases. A little bit of fun kind of rivalry between there really kind of makes the highlights of the league and makes those games like fun environments that people want to go into. It's just like you said, it's weird. We look at this and looking at finding a home for Birmingham, if we want to just try to do the standard East-West, just doesn't make any sense. With Alabama is not anywhere close to a West Coast state. I mean, even Memphis was very much like, come on. Anything further than Tulsa, and even that is that's pretty much the end of it right there, right? There's a lot of teams in the USL pyramid, roughly 110. Maybe they could kind of use some sort of kind of quick knockout tournament here that we can get through some of them to bring that sub 40, maybe do some group stages before you bring in the championship teams.
Would you do knockout, or would you do group stage where you have to play a couple of games? Because I could see some clubs, especially financially, going, get me out of this competition as fast as possible.
I mean, in some ways, maybe if we are talking about the viability of the league and in some markets, maybe having fewer games, as long as you still keep the home games like a decent amount, maybe in some ways that can help.
Which I think RIFC has 18 games slated in the ticket package for the season tickets right now. So when you look at that, that is one less game already. You would need 20 just to stand up, or actually no, you'd need a total of 18. So it's interesting to see. Regardless, though, let's talk about the other side of this division. It's time to go to dinner here. Who are we cannibalizing from Memphis, or is that too soon?
I mean, maybe too soon, but in this league, I think you kind of just have to like, I feel for their fans. That's terrible, but like, I'm also not going to dwell on it here for too much. Bruno Lapa, maybe Marlon. Those are some good Brazilian players that they have, maybe who could add some kind of attacking threat to our team. The only kind of question we have there is like, is that an upgrade for one of our own players? Or also there's the whole, well, do we know who we're going to get to keep or not? We have some ideas of maybe some certain people who we think are locked on to longer contracts. But even if you are locked onto a longer contract, like, how do we know an MLS team is not going to look at surging RIFC doing really well at the end of the season here? I might come in and snatch one of their players away.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of questions there. I could easily see if Doyle doesn't get a contract extension, or if Fuson gets picked up for from another USL team or an MLS team, or what do we do with Jack P? Right? There's a lot of questions there. I could see a Brazilian winger. I think though you need both. Like, they seem to do really well reciprocating off of each other. I don't know. I mean, obviously they're probably talented on their own right, but when they've scored in the bunches that they have this year, which
they only come in as a pair.
Yeah, honestly, kind of
package deal.
And I mean, so you talk about that, and then I also kind of think back to like the reinforcements that we may need. No one knows what's going to happen with Jackson Lee at the end of the season. LAFC still can absolutely pick up his discovery rights, and I can't imagine the club holding on to him for the kind of money that an MLS club would drop for that. Whether or not they loan him back to Rhode Island FC, or they say, hey, like, we'll put you in a USL team, but it's got to be as a starter somewhere, like a lock-on starter. I could see Tyler Derrick. He's an MLS veteran. He's a good keeper. He's a good dude, and he's a Houston Dynamo legend. And we have 60% of
there's a bunch of connections
the connections in the Dynamo. So I could easily see Tyler Derrick, and then also maybe Akeem Ward. He was probably the third best distributor and passer for Memphis 901 this year. He's a left back, and we don't have an answer yet for Morris Dugan. We don't know if Alves will be playing when it comes time for everything that's going on there. So it'll be interesting nevertheless, but we got to move on because we have other things to talk about, and that is Noah Fuson getting announced to the second team all league. The Golden Playmaker gets announced for this with his league leading 10 assists during the regular season. And there's a quote here from Coach Cano. He said, Noah will be the first to tell you that he can't accomplish this without his teammates, but this is his reward for all of his individual hard work. He's one of the hardest workers we have, and he has a lot of joy and passion for the game. He just loves playing and just wants to get better. And I think we've seen that all season from the guy. Like, he's been so dynamic. He's been so lights out in so many different capacities. He's been utilized. I mean, he's got over 2,400 minutes. He finished fourth in the league with 18 total goal contributions, and he led the team creating 50 chances. I mean, he was so hot at the end of the regular season. A little bit of that has kind of waned here in the postseason, but you can't deny the man. He attempted 62 crosses, completing 76% of his passes, and made a team-leading 53 key passes. I mean, the dude's just a beast. I guess I'd ask you, though, while this is a huge honor for him, it also kind of feels like it's a bit of a snub. I would think the Golden Playmaker would have made the first team, and I thought maybe at first it was like, okay, well, he's a forward, he's a winger, so like it's hard to like shoulder out someone like Nick Markanek, Wilson Harris. I forget who the third scoring person was in the league this year, but when you see where he was positioned in the second team, he's positioned as a midfielder, almost like a winger. So if that's the case, is there someone that he should have displaced from the first team?
Possibly. When I first saw this, I did think like, oh, is that kind of a snub? Maybe he should have been in the first team. But the more I think about it, maybe in a sense it's fair, only for the single fact that the first half of the season, in terms of offense and him being an offensive player, RIFC's output wasn't particularly great. We were a difficult team to beat, but that's how we established our Draw Kings, moniker is from that first half of the season. A lot of those were stubborn matches where maybe we're only scoring a goal or two. Actually, decent amount of nil-nils in there too. So I think if he had some more consistency, which I don't think is his fault, is more of this team took some time to gel, I think he would have displaced one of those first team players. But I think they look at that and say, well, regardless of what the reasons were, he only kind of had half a really great season, right? That first half, for whatever reason, being the team wasn't gelling or this or that, the output wasn't necessarily there.
All I'm going to say is that there are players on the first team that did not make it into the playoffs. And so if you have to have some baseline, some barometer, it should be, did your contribution reward your team with a playoff berth? And I'm looking at you, Jorge Hernandez. Your team did not make it into the playoffs. So I would have swapped them.
Yeah,
and I think that would have been a fair trade.
I mean, hey, if we lose some of our midfielders, what's he doing next season? I don't know.
After we just called him out here. Moving on, another big news, kind of, I don't know, bittersweet. How do you want to call this? Obviously, we've got some results from today's international game, but Jojea gets the call, picks up the phone, and here we are.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Depending on how you want to look at this, Jojea Quizera being called up to represent Rwanda in the AFCON qualifiers. I mean, that is a big deal, right? Especially when you go back and look at those broadcasts and they show, like, where's this player from? Oh, he's from Rhode Island Football Club. And, maybe you have Rwandans looking at that.
When you type in Rwanda soccer team or Rwanda Soccer Federation or anything like that, Jojea Quizera is the first player that pops up. Either that or Google knows that by my radius search, like, that's the first player to feed me.
So, I mean, like, it's probably important that our online store for RIFC there ships to Rwanda in case that they want some jerseys there. But yeah, when we look at the results today, I mean, they lost. I think, was he subbed out in the first half? I was kind of working
he
there.
was subbed out at the half.
I lost track of what was going on. And they're going to play Nigeria on this upcoming Monday. I checked in the result. Did you see what the final score of the other match was?
For Nigeria or for Libya?
For the Nigeria game, because whether or not they moved on was kind of dependent upon, I think, how.
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem right now is they're in third place after the loss today against Libya.
Okay, so the other result was a draw. 1-1.
Right. So, I mean, technically with this, could Rwanda make a push into the second spot in their group stage? The answer is absolutely yes. It's kind of difficult because you almost wanted to see a win today to galvanize the Rwandan team to make that final push, or you wanted Benin to kind of close things out and make it unobtainable for them. Only, and I say this as selfishly, so that we could get Jojea back. I made a joke earlier today. It's only a 15-hour flight, and if they were looking for the result,
I mean, if Labanda can drive that far to a Louisville game, I mean, right. He can fly back, right?
And Jojea doesn't have to drive the plane. So
yeah, he's just got to get on the plane.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's bittersweet for fans. I think a lot of them, myself included, there's a selfish like twang of just like, oh man, I really want you here. This is soccer. It's elimination phase. We need all of our weapons in the war chest. But at the same time, like you said, it's such an honor to be called up to represent your country. And, I think about it from the standpoint of, if you were Coach Kano and you said, hey, club before country, that message, that's one of those pieces of legacy or culture he doesn't like to talk about. It carries over to the next player and the next player. When they ask, like, oh, what kind of coach is Kano? The players will say he's the kind of guy that won't let you go and represent your country. And also too, when you think about it, like, I hate to say this, but Jojea, we may only have him for a year or two, right? Jojea could go off and get a bigger contract somewhere else, but he'll always be someone who has the ability to represent Rwanda. So in these moments, especially like you said, it's AFCON qualifiers. These are games that matter. These aren't friendlies. These are games that have intentional, outcomes that will make or break this team's advancement in AFCON. I don't hate him. In fact, I love that he wants to go and represent his country. I just think it's a terrible time for us and for the league. I guess I'd ask you, is this, we're one of a few clubs that had players go out on international duty, and we're one of a few clubs left that are in the playoffs. Is this a failing of the league to not be on a better schedule akin to the FIFA calendar? Like, do we need, if we want to keep growing and being bigger and taken serious on the international front, do we need to align our calendars? Because this happened last year to Charleston with Fidel Barajas.
Yes and no. I think part of it is dependent upon the league itself, right? If a league continues to grow and attract talent who is of a quality that would be called up to a national team, and you all of a sudden see that impacting your match days, where it's not like we're losing 5 to 10 guys, like we have 30 to 50 players out. And if some of these players are star attractions, all of a sudden you could have issues where, there are playoffs. So people are still going to go watch these matches. But, those FIFA breaks early on in the season, if you say, well, RIFC are playing this weekend, but 4 of their best players are out on international break, maybe the casual fans think, maybe that's a match I don't want to watch then.
Who knows? We'll see what the club does. We'll see what Jojea does. Whether he sneakily shows up on the game day roster on Saturday, or he remains to continue Rwanda's fight in AFCON. We wish him nothing but continued success and well-being. And so now it's time. We got to get into these brackets so we can get into the game recap itself. Let's talk about what happened last week in the West, and let's talk about what happened last week in the East. So surprisingly, no person left in the USL bracket competition remains. Everybody got knocked out after this last round. So whether someone didn't have faith in Rhode Island FC, or someone didn't have faith in Las Vegas Lights, or maybe Colorado, I don't know. But no one left. Out in the West, Orange County, they got the early jump on the switchbacks, but they literally froze on the field. Not only is that a blizzard joke after the blizzard delayed them and had to play on Sunday, but also as the game dragged on. I don't know if it was altitude. I don't know if it was just like the end of the year and how they had to fight back the entire time. But you saw that team just completely out of gas, out of oxygen, whatever you want to call it, losing 2-1 in extra time. Meanwhile, the Lights, bit of a controversy, and no one's covering it. So it makes me wonder if there's a gag order and we're going to get in trouble with the league by some chance, because I didn't hear it on the USL show. I didn't hear it on USL All Access. But people are saying that the Las Vegas Lights won their game with a literal 12th man on the pitch.
Interesting.
So, I mean, people went back, and for like 3 minutes towards the end of the game, we're talking like into stoppage time, there were literally 12 players on the pitch for Las Vegas, as there was a fourth official failure to recognize the swap for one of the players in a 3-player swap off the bench. So for about 3 minutes, it was not caught. It's hard to say. I looked back. There was a couple of opportunities where you could say, like, yeah, if you have an extra defender on the field, like, this is a problem. Overall, it's an embarrassing look, not for the league, but really for Pro, because Pro's the one that needs to be accountable here. I think the league really can't do a lot in those moments. But like, if we want to be taken serious, we got to be able to use our hands and our feet and be able to count the number of players at game time on that pitch. They didn't look really good, if I'm being honest. They only had one shot on target, and that was the one they converted in the 80-plus minute when they took advantage of a bad distribution from New Mexico. Neither one of these teams really look good right now, and I think that the winner of the Cup Final is going to be solidly in the Eastern Conference's favor. These teams just don't look good. And then meanwhile, in the East, what happened in Louisville, we're going to unpack that here in a second. But Tampa Bay couldn't get the job done themselves, as they also go up first after a goal from Artiega. But the Battery find a way to sneak one past after some poor defending from the Rowdies that saw none other than Nick Marcanic score and seal the deal and then plus Aaron Malloy with an out-of-this-world set-piece kick. I don't know what to tell you. The Tampa Bay Rowdies fail. Jordan Farr moves on to DC United, and the Rowdies are out of the playoffs, and our chances of a home playoff game are over.
DC who? I've never. Is that like a NISA team or something? I've never heard of them before. You mentioned that we can't host a final, and there's been a bit of confusion about that heading into our most recent Louisville City match. We thought if we had won there, we would be resigned to 4th place hosting position unless Orange County Soccer Club won, right? And a lot of our fans here have been kind of, going online and trying to engage with some conversations with various people who kind of represent the league, and maybe not an official capacity, but kind of maybe are looked for sources of knowledge who kind of have that insider information to kind of get some answers, because we do have more points there than some of these teams. But so we've received confirmation that they actually changed the rules last year, and essentially the reasoning behind this was various factors to determine, somewhat of an unbalanced competition. Maybe a little bit of a Miami rule or something where maybe everyone in a certain conference is almost guaranteed 6 points. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I have to go crunch some data there. But basically, what's going on here is they kind of reserve the right to decide where to host that final. Because ordinarily the highest seed team would host the playoff matches and the USL Championship final. But like I said, they've kind of decided to kind of reserve that right for themselves. I'm mixed on this. I can kind of see why, but I don't know if I love it.
I think the only reason that, this wasn't on people's radar last year was because, and it's so interesting because like the league says that they made this change. They just maybe didn't communicate it appropriately. Phoenix made this improbable run, being the last seeded position in the West, to where, the mathing didn't need to be mathed because you knew Phoenix had no chance, no requirement to host. And so with that being the case, I think this just kind of like slipped past people's attention. I'm not saying this because we wanted to host a USL Cup Final. I would have loved to, and hopefully we go to Vegas and maybe see some Grand Prix. I don't know. But it seems to me like this is the most balanced the schedule actually could be at any given time right now. I mean, it's why they unlocked and re-released the Players' Shield, because they said in a couple of seasons in the past, you had these teams just kind of throwing it in. And, you can call it the Miami FC rule if you want, but like looking at El Paso, the Western Conference teams whooped on El Paso. El Paso took 14 of its 34 points from the East. So like it kind of like that's on you at that point. But anyways, the craziest part of all of this isn't even just the positioning and the fact that we're out of a chance to host. It would have been great to at least maybe see the conference final against Tampa Bay. But the crazier thing, Jason, is that the final is going to be kicking off at 12 p.m. Eastern time, which means it's either just
we finally get that mimosa match I talked about earlier on.
Mimosa
with
match,
Loudon.
whiskey and waffles, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
Anyone traveling, whether it's Colorado at 10 a.m. or Las Vegas at 9 a.m., it's going to be a very early game for West Coast fans. Obviously, probably because they needed to, find the right time on CBS Prime. But there's definitely an East Coast bias here, and the USL HQ can't deny that any longer.
I mean, I'm not surprised at this point.
So let's get into the game here for a second. And let's talk about the away trip, and let's also talk about the guild. I want to. We're probably going to switch things around here because we have our guests coming on, so we may do the preview before the recap and then flip this. I don't know. It'll be interesting here, but I want to talk about. This just culture, this fan environment that's been created between the likes of going to the guild and then the, I think 30 fans, the 30 plus, I'm going to say, that traveled away to go watch this in Louisville. I've got my impressions from being on the road. You've got your impressions from being here at home at the guild. Talk to fans. Let them know, what are they missing out on from this most recent guild experience, and what's probably going to be replicated this weekend.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised, I will say. I unfortunately was, I don't want to say late because I got in right as the match started, but I had planned to be there a little earlier. I was doing some babysitting and ended up having, got caught behind a little bit. And I knew it was going to be packed there, but I didn't think it was going to be this packed where I would have to park like 3 streets away and like walk a few minutes over to the Guild. It was reminiscent of like maybe the what was it, the jersey reveal, where you just had tons of people there for a party, and it was packed. There was a beer line that went. I don't know if you've ever been to the Guild in Pawtucket, but it went from the bar all the way to the bathroom. I mean, it was wild. Every seat in the house was filled. There was just people standing. They had the game on both ends of the Guild. They had a projector on the other side that they used this time as well. And it was just a really good party atmosphere. People were really like engaged and excited to watch the match and get to celebrate with some of the front office there too, having a good time, really enjoying to see the fruits of their labor this season, all that hard work that they put in to kind of help make this team what they are. It was just a really fun, great environment.
How loud was it when those goals got scored? It must have blown the roof off.
Oh yeah, the place was a madhouse. I mean, even when it wasn't, it was just like I said, it was very much a party atmosphere. I think that people kind of felt that they were, a celebration of this season, that we've made it this far in our first year, and just kind of, take it all in and just say like, hey, at this point, we're just happy to be here.
And to be clear too, that was specifically for Rhode Island FC. That was not how it has been in the past, where it's like RIFC is here to watch the game, and any other person who just wants to randomly stop by may just kind of be caught up in the moment of it. The screen was on both ends. Everyone was there for one unique purpose, and that was to celebrate the boys in amber and blue. Honestly, if I didn't get to go where I was, I would have been extremely jealous, because that looked like the most happening place for a Rhode Islander in the state on that night. But I can tell you where the other most happening spot, if you were a Rhode Islander, was, and that was at Louisville, Kentucky, at Lynn Family Stadium. Dude, words can't describe. You and I have traveled to several stadiums over our lifetime of watching soccer, and we've seen some really good stadiums, and we've seen some really poor stadiums. And I remember back, like episode 5 of this podcast, when we did like the stadium review, and we saw Lynn Family Stadium, and we recognized then that like that looks like the ultimate experience. I'm kind of disappointed now in myself that my 2 travels within the USL now have been Hartford, which is whatever. I don't need to punch down on them right now. And then now it's going to the top. Lynn Family Stadium is gorgeous. It's a cathedral of soccer. Like everything there is clean. Everything there is crisp. I mean, I put up a bunch of videos while I was there kind of documenting it, and it just took my breath away when I got to go out on the pitch. And there's lights, there's sound, everything is just designed for the fans. I will tell you, I didn't realize it at the time, but the stadium is design-wise is very familiar to the San Jose Earthquakes. I don't know if it's still a Via Stadium or if they've lost the naming rights on that, but it's the same one. They've got an open-end kind of patio and bar underneath their big screen out there, and the place can hold 16,000. They had like 9,500 there, and it still felt full. Like the only place on the stadium area where you didn't see people was actually in the field like level boxes and the field level seats, because it was raining. And wouldn't you know it, they have an awning that goes around the entirety of the stadium, so everyone that was in the second deck dry as a bone. Everyone that wasn't in there soaking wet or needed a poncho, which is interesting that if Kentucky can figure that out, I'm still a little peeved that Rhode Island is going to go into this project with no elemental coverage or protection. So it'll be interesting, but here we are. It is what it is. I got to see the Players Shield. They just left it out. There was no one around when I literally could have stolen the shield.
It's crazy. It's gone. Where did it go?
Been banned. I mean, maybe I would have gone down as a USL like hero, but I would have been banned for life on everything. I saw their trophy cabinet where all of their cups and their other shields are. It was such a delight, and it was weird to know that like we have our stadium coming online next year, and seeing theirs got me so excited for Tidewater. And more clubs need stadiums like this, whether it's something to that magnitude. But you can tell the difference in the quality of an organization by how that stadium was compared to maybe some of our friends in the East and West that play in baseball stadiums. So the more teams that get soccer specific stadiums, the better. And, hey, maybe the Revolution will finally figure that out too, because apparently they made some progress today as well.
Yeah, something is apparently going on over there. I guess I'm not going to, get too excited. We'll just kind of wait and see what happens with that.
Isn't it so weird that like we are getting excited at the idea that the fan base will move further north so that we can have a separation of custody, if you will, over the fan base? I love that. I know that there are fans of both. We've said it multiple times this year, but like soccer specific stadiums are the answer. It's how this sport will grow in this country, and I'm just super excited to see more of it.
I mean, also just as a soccer fan, to take a step back for a second, I mean, to have a giant soccer stadium in the area, if they build it out as a soccer stadium, like we could have like USMNT matches there that are actually of high quality and not just like, some random garbage pitch that along the way,
Wouldn't the like ultimate travesty be if the Crafts built a soccer specific stadium and they still went with turf so that like we could never get a national team game there? I mean,
it's
obviously
probably
we're
happen,
doing
honestly.
it, so but we don't have Craft money, so
yeah. So
you hate to see it. So let's get into, we've talked now about the away watch, we've talked about the traveling party. I do want to say one last quick thing, and that's the incredibleness of this community. La Banda is going down to the Charleston Battery game, and they were a little low on funds. So Defiant 1636 threw out a GoFundMe. Guess what? It filled up within 25 minutes, and there are some big donations. They want to not have a spotlight put on them, but I'm going to just say, Scott Beer, you're an incredible human being, and thank you so much. Can't wait to see these guys go down. They may not be able to bring their drums. I've heard from Charleston operations that the drums will not be allowed, but we heard the same thing at Louisville. They were only going to be allowed to bring in one. And then the home supporters group said, oh no, that's okay. You guys can bring your drums in. So we'll have to see what happens there. But either way, really excited about that. But that's for the Charleston preview. Jason, let's get into this lineup and the surprises that we saw on the night.
Yeah, so as usual, we saw Koke Vegas and net with a back three there of Dugan, Yao, and Stoneman. And then in that midfield five there, we had Jojea Quizera, Mark Ibarra, Zach Harivo, Clay Holstead, and then a Frank Nodarce playing out there on the right. As we kind of predicted, as it looks like Steven Turnbull's injury is going to keep him out here for a bit, potentially the rest of the season. We kind of, that, as they say, remains to be seen. And then up top, as usual, we're having Noah Fuson and the red hot JJ Williams.
I think the only question we really had was who would sub in for that alternate with Turnbull's departure. Turnbull on the bench for the last game. At the end of the day, Amos Shapiro-Thompson makes sense to get the call up. I was a bit confused that we didn't have another defender. That kind of didn't really work out for us.
Yeah, we had expected maybe to see a Colin Smith, but at this point, it seems like, coaches kind of pick the guys that he trusts to kind of see out the rest of the season. I think he's not extending outside of that.
Well, I mean, he's going to have to for the preview ahead because we're now short another body with Jojea.
Yeah, we'll get to that a little bit later.
But having said that, I do think that, this changes very little other than the fact that when we saw our defenders being subbed, both Dugan and Nodarce in the 60th plus minutes, it kind of left you with a bit of a head scratch because suddenly now the only defender left, and that's if you want to call him a defender, Kofi Chumesi enters the game, and there is no one left to hold down that back line. If there's an injury, if we need just to make a tactical rotation, we literally played with an offensive kind of mindset. You could have maybe dropped Clay Holstead back, and there's a moment we're going to talk about here in a second where that happened. But really, like, this just says coach has this, like, it's the never say die mentality, but it's also we're going to go out, we're going to attack, and we're going to attack some more. I want to get into this match summary. This is going to be an extremely short preview because we have a very long preview of the Charleston Battery coming up. So this is going to be the tightest one we've ever done. But I want to talk 6 games unbeaten for both of these teams. Both teams have 4 wins. Both teams had 2 draws per side. One of them had to give in this face-off. Rhode Island FC scored 3 goals in both of the playoff games. Lou City didn't quite do that. No other team has actually scored more than 2 in a single game this postseason. So, like, when we talk about momentum and the shift into high gear, it's JJ Williams is carrying this team on his back. It's a team effort, but JJ is like the spark behind this. I guess, like, if we think about it, like, I don't know what to really even talk about in this game that fans weren't paying attention to. JJ scores his 10th and 11th goal of the year, now taking the top score if you count regular and postseason contributions. And all of that until 20 minutes after, where Chico goes, no, hold my beer. I'm going to go and score my 11th goal of the season after an incredible cross from Mark Doyle where he draws the PK. It doesn't get quite converted, but then he cleans up and scores his 11th goal. Where I want to start this and maybe end this conversation is really around the XG. We talk a lot about it. I think when I look at the XG, Louisville had a higher XG at 1.78 than Rhode Island FC's 1.34. But we talked about this. This was David versus Goliath, allegedly. Goliath was slain. How did Lou City have more XG on the night?
I think when we look at this case specifically, it's a quantity over quality type of thing. Lou City only registered 4 shots on target, while they did have, 14. So that's 10 shots that, where are those going?
Well, I mean, 9 were from the inside of the box.
So they were getting themselves into good positions, and that's how you see that high XG, right? When you put yourself in a good position. But the problem is maybe they didn't bring their shooting boots with them. Combine that with a red hot Coque Vegas, who has been, just gobbling up saves for us.
4 saves in this game alone, including a penalty.
Yeah, I mean, it's very impressive result for Rhode Island's defense here to keep out a team that scored 83, 85 goals. I forget what it is, astronomical, like a number you think of like a Premier League giant, right? The amount of goals they scored. It's not something you see often here in America. We don't have these offensive powerhouses.
This was only the 3rd game of the entire season for Louisville City where they did not find the score sheet. And one of those other games was also against us in our 0-0 draw earlier this season. I think, to your point, offensively, everything is clicking, but I really think we have to put the spotlight on the defense in this game, because the reason that this game, I mean, Louisville outpossessed, they outpassed, they outshot, they did a lot of things that on paper they had a commanding performance. And whether you watch the game in person or only watch the highlights, you may argue, like, I don't know that I saw the same thing that it says on paper. But where RIFC really shined brightly in this game was they dominated all of the defensive stats. And when you have that kind of masterclass of a performance, when you have someone like JJ Williams capitalize on the few chances that he gets, you see a team that's not being able to be broken down. That they couldn't really do anything against RIFC from a creative perspective. And then, you look at the offense and they take their few chances and they convert. And that's soccer 101.
I mean, it some ways it's reminiscent of, like, not 100%, but like peak Jose Mourinho teams, right? Like, hey, I am so comfortably solid and organized in the back that I kind of just let my strikers up there, someone like a Didier Drogba, he's like, give him a chance or two, he's going to finish it. You have your defense, your midfield, your back line working their butts off to, keep that clean sheet, so that all you need is an opportunity or two for a red hot striker to kind of secure you the win there.
And like I said, if I can just kind of reinforce the defense, they did such a good job of locking down Serrano, Perez, and Harris. This was definitely a game that was fought in the midfield. We did not get as much of our kind of away percentage when it came to, like, intercepting the ball in the high press. The high press worked wonders, but a lot of those balls, a lot of that distribution ended up getting into the midfield. And that's where we shined even brighter with JJ Williams, either in the aerials or just the way we clogged the midfield with our kind of trio of Haribo, Holstead, and Ibarra. we were winning a majority of the second balls. So much so that Coach Danny Cruz had to rotate Philip Goodrum in and pull off one of his wingers to be able to clog that midfield in the second half. And I would say that that's the only time in the entire game where Lou City looked dangerous, was those initial halftime substitutions. They saw us suddenly change the dynamic of what Louisville was doing to control the ball, and suddenly they looked dangerous for about 25 minutes, peppering us with about 6 shots and kind of really keeping us in the defense for a while until coach could make the subs that he felt were appropriate. I want to highlight Frank Nodarse. We talked right wing back. It was a curious thing. Could he handle this at the penultimate level of play when it came to Lou City versus, the Miami FC that we saw earlier? And I think he did amazing. It was both a tale of, he got the assist for JJ Williams, but then he also only got 4 passes in the first half, right? You saw him, his whole job was to lock down Serrano. His whole job was to just try to contain that right side of Rhode Island FC's shape. But by the 60th minute, homie looked dead. I don't think he's ran that many minutes. I don't think he's ran that many miles. I would love to see his heat map, and I guarantee you it was probably double the output, considering how often he was on the other side of the halfway line. And you saw it by the 60th minute. Serrano was tucking in, waiting for through balls, and just hitting the afterburners and leaving Nodarse in the dust. There was a moment, I don't know if you saw it, but when Clay Holstead had to track back and just sprint to tackle Serrano with Goodrum, and I think Widener was up front at the time. If Serrano hadn't been stopped there, that would have easily been a goal for them. So I'm not diminishing what Nodarse did for the night, but it was just a defensive masterclass from this team. And coach knew when to kind of exhaust his players and when to make the necessary subs. These guys were beat up at the end of the game.
Yeah, I think Frank left it all out there on the pitch. If I look a little bit of some stats here, they're not huge numbers, but he won 3 out of his 3 tackles, 1 out of 1 accurate long balls, 5 out of 6 ground duels, 4 clearances, 4 interceptions. There's a few more stats there I kind of left off, but he was phenomenal, I think, on the night, and he's been one of our most important defenders. And not only defending is that he contributes to the attack. So he's been very much a double threat. So in that regards, I can kind of maybe see why he's getting a little extra tired, because he's finding himself in those positions to assist and score goals. So he's putting a little extra miles on those legs.
Yeah. And then, we got to fly through this super fast. I know we should have done 2 episodes this week, but with me not getting home until end of day Monday, we're just completely off. But I will say, I'm tired of the growing conspiracy that exists with fans of all of these clubs now saying that Rhode Island FC has bought the refs, or that USL HQ has paid off Pro as an organization to give this new team the outcomes. Let's get our heads out of wherever they're being stuck, because the reality is there was no poor officiating in the Indy game. All of those were correctly called. But then, while I want to be fair and balanced, and we try to do a pretty good job of that, I will say that maybe Elton Garcia didn't have his best game as a head ref, but I also don't think that he really changed a lot of the impact to the game, unlike, having a 12th man on the field for Las Vegas Lights. And it comes from a couple of things. I think Louisville City fans are completely right within their mind to be upset that RIFC earned back-to-back corner kicks for balls that no Lou City player touched. Well, I was up there. I saw it. I had the best seat in the house. No one touched them. It was just a bad call. And then Elton Garcia was like, what if I did it again?
Another one.
That being said, neither one of those corner kicks changed the outcome of the game outside of wasting some minutes or potential momentum, which maybe that's fair. But the one that everyone's furious about was Koke Vegas dropping a ball, it landing on the line, Lou City claiming it was a goal, the smoke popped off, the stadium lights went on, the PA announced it, only for Elton Garcia to partner with the AR and say that did not cross the line. We heard this secondhand, but allegedly an RIFC fan traveled home on his flight and actually had Elton Garcia on the plane and asked him if that was a goal or not. And Garcia doubled down and said, absolutely not. We had a clear line of sight to it. It did not. I'm very confident in that answer. Obviously, goal line technology is the solution here, but where I was sitting from, it looked like it went in.
Okay, interesting. I was coming at this from a different perspective. When I saw this, I thought they were calling a foul on Koke. I know that often goalkeepers can get protected in the way that, maybe people familiar with NFL are, that you don't touch the quarterback. They're like very limited amount of contact you can with him. So yeah, I saw that different. I didn't realize that they the apparent issue here was that it went over the line.
Which is difficult because the Koke's back, there's a picture of it I have, and it's slipping right through his hands. His back is to the AR, so there's no way the AR has an unobstructed view of that. And also, to the ball's wet, he does make contact with Widener in the air, which probably helped unsettle the ball from him trying to kind of clutch it and lock it down. But like, I have to kind of think, if it's that close and this is like a playoff game, like I I understand both directions on it, but like, it looked like it was in from my side. So I don't know what the communication was between those refs. There wasn't really great communication on Louisville City side either, between their defenders and their goalkeepers all night. Like, there was a lot of chaos here. It led to 2 penalties. Both of them get denied, which
Yeah.
I want to ask, by the way, if we move on to that really quickly, is this a sign that the keepers in this league are incredible, or do we have some really bad penalty takers in this league?
I think maybe the latter a little bit. When I was listening to the USL show the other day, I think was it Kaylor mentioned that USL penalties seem to be like amazing unblockable. Like there's only 2 settings. So like amazing unblockable, or they're hit too softly. So there's no kind of in between. Other worldies that are like no one is saving that, or it's just like, yeah, you didn't make the keeper work too hard there, did you?
I'm a huge fan of Noah Fuson. Does this hurt or help him?
Um, I think after the season that he's had, I think he'll be okay. I do think that he will maybe be doubted to step up to take another penalty, especially after 2 in a row. But he's had a really good kind of close to the season. Golden playmaker. He's contributed a decent amount of goals there too. So maybe he's just in a bit of a rut there. So I imagine he probably won't step up to take a penalty for a little bit until he gets another 1,000 practices in or something.
I was gonna say until it's extra time in a
Yeah,
playoff
at
game
that
where
point, you
it's do or
have to
die.
have that killer mentality and just step up and say, like, forget what happened. I'm just going to get it done now because it needs to be done.
So we got to wrap this up because we've got our guests coming in here. But I want to ask you, lots of people said online this was a cup set. I don't know how this is a cup set. Was this a cup set to you?
I don't know. I mean, in some ways, I guess it just kind of depends on how you look at it. RIFC momentum wise are the team to beat right now. They are red hot. We've scored a ton of goals here at the end of the season. Louisville have a tendency to kind of go down early despite producing a lot of goals themselves. Maybe their defense, while nothing to scoff at, like we've mentioned in the past, it's maybe not their strong point. And I think one of the big like draws that they have to them is that no one wants to play at Linfield Stadium. Um, but RAFC had a really good match there, and I think it showed. I think that you saw right off the bat that RAFC felt comfortable playing, and they were not scared of the stadium. They're not scared of the environment, and they rose to the occasion and just got it done.
I talked to a fan afterwards, and they said, I don't know why people keep calling their stadiums fortresses. All fortresses fall. Like, why would you want to do that to yourself? And I will say also, the Louisville fans, I don't know if I said this when I was talking about the away trip, but they were so gracious.
Oh, completely class act. In the same way when they way back when they visited us, I think they gave like a really nice whiskey or something to our supporters group.
Couple of bourbons, yeah.
Yeah, so bunch of great people over there.
Yeah, and they were really accommodating, not only before the game but even afterwards. Obviously, a lot of upset, frustrated fans that's how their season ended, but they went on to cheer us and said, "Hey, like, you beat us, now go do what we wanted to do and win the whole thing." Right? Like, a lot of faith was invested in our team. I'll say this, and I'm stealing it from someone on the Discord. I just wish I could remember who. They said that this was a 5th seed team, but they're playing like they're a 1st or 2nd seed. And I think back to what you said about the form and the momentum, that's absolutely right now, because not only are we putting away games, but there are high scoring affairs. We're locking these games down. And, people saying Lou lost because of the 1st seed curse. The reality is that Rhode Island FC has embodied that never stay that never say die. It's so powerful. I can't even say it, Jason, but that never say die mentality. And like I said earlier, they're playing with house money at this point. And when you look at this, all of the other clubs, all of the other fans kind of have their eyes on this expansion side right now, and you kind of have to help root for them at a certain point. Like kind of like Phoenix last year, like, oh, they can't win it all away. Well, now suddenly there's a potential that could not only happen again, but in a club's first year. And I would say that Rhode Island FC's journey has been way more difficult than what Phoenix Rising had to go through. Maybe it's the Brett Johnson effect. I don't know. But,
maybe.
I think, that this wasn't a Goliath slaying. This wasn't David versus Goliath. I think these were two teams meeting at a flashpoint, and they were two incredible teams that went out and played their best. And unfortunately for Louisville City, Rhode Island FC just played it a little better. I don't think that they responded as well as they needed to. And maybe they underestimated us. I don't know. I think that all goes away now that we have taken down the first seed, and that any other club is going to be very wary of us. But what this really does is this puts a level of freedom on the players. We heard that like they didn't have any pressure because there were no expectations, and I think whatever internal metrics were put on them, I think they've accomplished them. So like at this point, they just get to go and have fun and see where this takes them. And I think that like they get to lift, like the Louisville City club, they look at this as a failure. They won Supporter Shield, Player Shield, and then they didn't win the USL Cup. For us, getting to the playoffs was the first milestone. Advancing in the playoffs was a milestone. Advancing deeper was a milestone. Like what happens if it doesn't work out? Nothing. We get to continue to build and be an even better team. But right now we're so dang good that we could win the whole thing. And I think that that's an exciting level of unlock that puts these players in an even more dangerous attitude than wherever they were the game before or the game before that.
Yeah, it's an exciting place to be at, where we don't really have any history yet to look back and think, oh, that time where we were in this final or we were at this match and we just missed it barely. Like, it's new uncharted territory for RIFC. So at this point, anything that happens is just, icing on the cake to a certain extent.
Anything is possible.
Pretty much.
But we got to move on. So any final thoughts?
Very impressive win. I think that RIFC can kind of continue this momentum. We'll get into that here in a few minutes, but just happy to be here at this point. I think that whatever happens, I'm just really proud of what this team has accomplished, and just can't wait to continue supporting RIFC for many years to come as we see this team really put a stamp on the league in their first year.
But now it's time to move on, and to get us prepped for this Eastern Conference final against the Charleston Battery are the hosts of the Howlers and Holy City Sound Off podcasts, Andrew and Connor. Gentlemen, welcome to the pod. Are you guys ready for this historic matchup this weekend?
We are indeed ready. I'm very ready, very excited. Can't wait to see the team kicking about, and also excited that Rhode Island is where they are, because Andrew and I are both Northeasterners too.
I did hear that in your episode of Tide Talk. I'm curious, what's it like knowing that the team that you cover in consortment with your rest of your amazing soccer coverage, what's it like knowing that you're betraying your New England roots by rooting for a team down in South Carolina?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if we knew about Rhode Island, I guess the news was around that they were coming about, but it's a bit of, I'd say it's complex, but either way, if either team wins, we get to kind of rep either.
Connor, how about yourself? What's it feel like to be a traitor to your region?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you could call it a traitor. So I'm originally from Connecticut. So I guess if I was to back a team, it would be Hartford. And I had been to Hartford matches prior to like even really knowing much about the Charleston Battery. So I guess what I can say is like, I wouldn't call it traitors because there's a lot of good teams in the Northeast. Rhode Island is a good one to pick. and there's another one on the way. So, yeah,
I'd say you've got an upgrade there, considering how well they've been doing.
Yeah, Connor just did the natural journey of a Hartford Athletic fan and just left and found another project, another opportunity. So it's perfectly fine.
That's a bold statement, but I'll roll with it just for the sake of.
So it looks like we lost Andrew there for a second. So while we try to figure things out, we'll bring this back in here, and we'll see. This is gonna be fun. This doesn't need to be completely all on at all times. Like, we get to have fun here. So, but for the sake of time, because I don't know about you guys, we run historically long on all of our episodes. I want to get into a little bit about the history of the Battery and their relationship to the playoffs. You guys are the oldest team in the USL, so we could spend 2 hours probably alone just covering kind of the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations. But Jason, what did you learn in your Charleston Battery history? And let's see if Connor passes you on this test.
Okay, so yeah, I did a little bit of research here. So before we jump into the matchup, take a step back and kind of look at the Charleston Battery's rich history in knockout soccer in America. While most RIFC fans will remember them being the runners-up last year in 2023's final against Phoenix Rising, the team was in a bit of a rut, having failed to qualify for 2 consecutive seasons prior to Ben Pierman taking the reins. They have won the chip in 2012 during the non-modern era, as well as USL 2 in 2010. The A-League in 2003. It's crazy that they played in Australia.
A-League.
And then the USISL Pro in 1996. I feel like they're just making up leagues. I've never heard of these before. But they're probably most famous for being the runners up against DC United in 2008 after knocking out then Seattle Sounders, who were in still a USL club at the time. So it was a hotly contested offsides goal that kind of denied South Carolina team the oldest hardware in American history there.
So does that pass? Andrew, we're going to put you on the spot since you just came back in. Is everything that Jason said accurate?
Sorry about that. I lost connection. I missed that last part. If you could repeat that one more time.
How about if we just say, is losing to DC United in the 2008 Open Cup run the most famous moment in the Charleston Battery's history?
That is putting me on the spot. To go that far back, would have to read up a Wikipedia article around that. So
I would say the trophies lifted are definitely better moments to recall.
Yeah, I think any loss wouldn't be something I would account as history made.
Well, it's interesting. The Battery do not have a star because the championship they won not in the modern era. Does that rub like the old guard, the old fans wrong? Because there's other teams now that, like, even Orlando City get to claim stars even though they're now in MLS. Does that rub Battery fans the wrong way?
That would be a great question to ask them. With the fans that we've got to interact with, even this past Saturday, they're very go with the flow and very appreciative of the history. There is obviously a young crowd, but there's also kind of an old guard. The regiment represents that very well. And I don't think that would really bother them. They're very traditionally oriented, and they have brought back some of the rivalries. There was 2 trophies there just from local rivalries that they share with Tampa and NCFC. But I haven't heard too much distress around not being able to carry the star, because they do rep those trophies proudly and the championships, despite them maybe not being the USL championship or the modern era, because that is the price of being like the longest consecutive running club in North America or in the United States, is that the structures, as we know, aren't always the cleanest.
I mean, at this point, if you're the Battery, you just have to say, hey, we don't have to worry about losing our club any given year like Memphis had to deal with this week. So you guys just get to win by outlasting, out surviving, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, it was heartbreak to see the news about Memphis. And I know there are potential for other clubs to kind of face the same reality. I know there was talks that it's not just Memphis. So hopefully not, we don't want to see USL clubs fold. And it's gut-wrenching to see stuff like that.
Absolutely. If we take this back to, all the way to the last second of the 2023 USL Cup Final till now, How do you reflect on this season? How do you reflect on this current postseason in comparison to, taking second place last season?
Yeah, so it is similar, obviously, in a lot of ways that we've made it this far to the Eastern Conference Final. I think in terms of the difference, it's the system that Pierman has instilled even more this season than last. One of the things that he had mentioned on our sit down with him, and I know we'll probably get to that later on in this conversation, was he talked about the expectation that teams have this season when facing up compared to last season. Last season, the Battery coming off a poor, one of the worst seasons they've ever had. So the reality of how good they were wasn't really clear. This season, it's much different. So teams face off and shape up in a way that they can hit. They can hit Charleston on the counter. Charleston are usually the ones dominating possession, dominating the match. So I think that's something that Pierman has had to adjust the guys with, and that would be kind of the difference. Like we saw tons of goals against Indy in the semifinal last year. I don't think the same thing's happening in this playoff run. So overall, I think for the team itself, it's going to be a team that's more cohesive, but also understanding that teams understand them, and so they have to quickly adjust to any changes that a team's going to tactically switch up on them in the moment. So I think that's kind of the main difference is just seeing how much more this team is a unit compared to last. And I think every game last year, or it was more of a surprise where we're seeing the Battery, where we saw the Battery last year as compared to this season. So,
Connor, no, I appreciate that. Connor, I think back to your guys' interview with Ben just recently, and, were there a lot of expectations that this team would get as far as they did last year? Or is this kind of where they were supposed to be? This isn't supposed to be a revenge story. This is supposed to be exactly where they wanted in that second year. Our Coach Cano Smith, has said very much the same, that this may have been a 1 to 2 year project, and we're just kind of benefiting from the fruit of our labor a little early here. Was that always the case for Pierman?
Yeah, I think that is very much the case. Something that I always say, like talking to Ben, even hearing from the owner, like Rob, it's a bit of a reality check to be that far ahead of plan and keeping the fans on board and kind of bringing those expectations back down to earth after something so successful occurred unexpectedly. And I think last season was, despite them being the Battery being a very high seed, top half of the table, home field advantage, those kind of things, it felt as a fan or a viewer much more of a dark horse making a run, similar to what Rhode Island's doing this year, despite being that 7 seed. So yeah, it is good to put it into perspective and understand a lot of these things do take time, but when you're a fan, if things are going good in the world of football, you have to jump on and just enjoy the ride.
No, I agree. And I think, if we look back on this, like you said, we're playing with house money. We kind of said that earlier in the recording. I guess what I want to ask you, though, is we're dealing right now with the immediate known loss that we probably will not have Jojea Quizera. I mean, there's a possibility, but I just don't see him leaving his international call-up, especially with his team losing today. I look back, we watched the final as a group with the supporters group for Rhode Island. That was kind of our first taste of playoff action, watching you guys. And we noticed, Fidel Barajas not being in the squad, it seemed to change a lot of the dynamism that you guys had. And it felt like a gut punch being an outsider to the team. I can't help but think we're in the similar situation this weekend. What was that like, reflecting back? Obviously he's not with you guys anymore, but do you look at this as glass half full because you've made the acquisitions, you've taken the money and gotten some great players off of it, and do you see this as oh, we know what it's like to play without one of your best, and sucks to be you, Rhode Island FC?
Yeah, I mean, as far as Fidel goes, what a player. It is a tough player to miss in a final, and I can definitely see that comparison that you draw. And it is such moral battle, I would imagine, for a player as well, because every player wants to go represent their nation. Fidel was also on a call-up. But then again, the club that you play for, you have a lot of pride for. and they're the ones that pay the bills at the end of the day. So it's certainly a tough choice. But I think just like thinking about the final last year and the teams that you have and the momentum that knockout football offers, I don't think I really personally noticed it as much as maybe an outsider would. Just because as you watch the team all year, players come in and out of the side. The first team rotates. So I would offer a token of optimism that there is good fortune for Rhode Island despite missing some key marquee players, or just one. Because I think despite Fidel being out, you have that cohesive unit, you have the momentum of the playoffs, and yeah, you just kind of ride that excitement. I would say, yeah, if I had to sum it up.
I think for like in the potential loss for on your end of things, as Connor's mentioning, like riding this high, I think it lifts players up to play at a level we've never seen before, and missing out or having a player that's not available that is your marquee player or one of your marquee players, it allows for other players to really step up and kind of take that on. So I think, like Fidel, not having Fidel last year was difficult, but we did see other players shine. We did see the team be more of a team in that regard, picking up for the expansive style of play that Fidel had. So, I feel for you guys in that sense of potentially not having one of your marquee players.
You don't feel that much though.
No. I mean, to be fair too, when we last matched up against him, he only played, was it 25 minutes or something?
It was the similar problem. He had just come back from international break.
So I think we performed fairly well without him. Obviously, you would want your quote unquote full strength squad there, but I'm not gonna if the result doesn't go our way, I'm not gonna come back and blame it on, well, if Joe J was there. I mean, maybe, but we'll have to wait and see what happens.
We'll be tuning in afterwards to see what.
Yeah.
Speaking of that result and kind of looking back from that moment, it hasn't been that long since these two clubs last faced each other. The last matchup away to Charleston, so similar format here. It's only been a few days short of a month, which it's just the fun part of it, right? Like sometimes you can get your matches out of the way early in the season, and then it's like, what do these teams look like? But both of these teams kind of have left a nasty aftertaste in each other's mouths after the 1-1 draw. Charleston, since that game, has moved on 3 matches, 3 wins, 5 goals, 2 conceded. Rhode Island FC also 3 matches, 3 wins, 14 goals scored. Thanks, Miami, and 3 conceded. I guess the question for you guys is, do we see our coaches tinkering at this point? Is it too much of a recency bias that, the results, they fell flat? Obviously, a draw is a point, but neither team has bested the other this season. Is this a game of getting in each other's heads at this point, or proving which system works better?
I think in terms of tinkering and mind games, I don't know if Pierman's the type of coach to play into that. And similar with your head coach, I feel like both are very confident in trusting the 11 they put out there. So you see Pierman tinker from time to time, but I think it's only because he's seeing something in training, not because of, we drew 1-1 with this squad and then this squad. So if any changes do occur, I expect that to be, just of what Pierman's thinking, how he's feeling, and less so of kind of the mind games that we do love to see in football.
Jason, how about you on the Rhode Island FC side of things? Is Kano has some tough decisions to make here on this game day selection, but do you see him tinker? Do we see a brand new formation?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to what Andrew's saying here. I don't really see either teams making sweeping changes. They had mentioned in the broadcast that the coaches, because they kind of have a somewhat of a friendly relationship there, they were kind of sharing tactics with each other. It's almost like they're both so confident in their own abilities. They're like, I'm going to show you my paper, and I'm still going to go out there and beat you. So I think that they're both going to go out there, and we're going to see kind of a similar match. I think it'll maybe feel like a chess match a little bit at certain times, and that's not to say that there won't be excitement. but both teams are going to be trying to look to neutralize each other in a certain way, but also play their own game.
So, Connor, how do you feel so far about the playoff results you've had so far? Obviously, you've advanced to the Eastern Conference Finals, but has that been a confident advancement, or have there been opportunities that Pyramid needs to address?
I would say it's been confident. Going in, I was not thrilled about the Pittsburgh draw in the first round because they are a team that obviously just doesn't concede goals. And Pyramid speaks very highly of Bob Lilly and just the tactics that he relies on, maybe not even with the strongest squad. And it's something that he's done over and over again, even looking back to last season, lifting the Players' Shield, just based on like, not tactics alone, because he does have some quality players on the side. But I think getting a 1-0 result against them was huge. The only maybe concern that I've had just across the playoffs is the slight lack in attacking prowess. We're used to seeing the Battery score goals, and sure, 2-1's a good result against the Rowdies, but it feels like there could be a little more goals on the table. So if we just ramp up the finishing ability or slightly more clinical, it'll make the games feel a lot more comfortable, because coming from behind against Tampa was not an easy task. And Andrew and I were there, and we were watching the game, and we're like, oh my gosh, like it's 60 minutes gone. Like we were actually like on the move when the first goal went in, so we missed the equalizer. But yeah, just like how quickly these playoff matches go, being behind, it's tough to do. So the Rowdies game was a little bit more dicey than the Pittsburgh match, but overall, I would say those two matches, they have been confident in the sense of like the players do not look rattled even when going behind. They're very trustworthy in the system, and the belief is there because of, I think, that advantage of going deep into last year's playoffs. Like, sure, there's some new faces, but there's a lot that can be learned in even one postseason run, which hopefully your fellows are taking notes on this year too.
A case of been there, done that. Andrew, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's well spoken. I guess the only thing I would add is the 11 that we're seeing, they're relentless. They swarm teams with the fitness levels that they're at. That's how I would describe the Tampa game. It just felt like nonstop. Yes, Tampa went up, but it's almost like some of these players are robotic with how much they run and how they fight for every ball. So you could there were, as Connor mentioned, there was moments of, there's a lot of key moments where we could have capitalized and gone 2-3 up against Tampa. So the opportunities are there. It's just kind of capitalizing on them a bit more effectively. So yeah, that's all I'd really add to the playoff run so far.
I'm so glad you mentioned the fitness and the robotic part, because I will tell you, having ran into the players after the game for Rhode Island, after Louisville City, you could tell like they were beat up, they were banged up. Nothing to be concerned from like an injury perspective, but they squeezed every inch of every mile out of their legs, out of their bodies to get those results. And that was a commanding game for them, having won 3-0. So knowing that, you know, they're putting almost more of themselves on the line because tomorrow holds no promise. It's just it's an interesting perspective right now. So I think if we jump into this game itself, you know, getting into the specifics, one, I do want to talk about the ref, because Rhode Island's been getting a lot of flack lately over some reffing controversy, saying that we've been basically paying the USL for some calls, which I strongly disagree with. But I do want to bring up this head ref, because when I saw the name on the card, I didn't recognize this ref, and that's for good reason. So the head ref of this game is going to be Kalen Radisov, and Radisov has not reffed a game for Rhode Island FC all season, and he's also not reffed a game for the Charleston Battery since 2023 in October. I'm curious, you know, one of the things that good coaches, good tactical strategists will do is they'll look at that ref, kind of understand what type of game that they try to administer, and make sure that their players take advantage of or don't kind of fall out of line against. Does this hurt or help these two teams? Because, you know, these were very physical teams against each other in both legs of the home and away series. Jason, I'll ask you first. Is this a problem for Rhode Island? A new ref, new problems?
That it's hard to say. I didn't look this ref up to kind of see what his track record is, so I don't know like how he likes to ref a game, and also don't know if I would say familiarity really, does any benefit for a ref. Maybe for players it does, in terms of like, okay, I played with this guy before. I know what he's going to do, but at the same time, like, refs are human, and maybe one day they're feeling a bit stricter than they normally do. There's some consistency, but it also feels like in the USL it's like consistent inconsistency.
Anything is possible. I don't even know if Radisov is a male, by the way. Kalen, the way it's spelled, it could go either way, but not that matters or anything like that. But they are middle distant to the average for the amount of games that they've reffed in the championship this season. So they're not heavy in one direction or another. But that being said, this is a big game. They don't have any playoff experience this year, and they only had one, I think, back in 2019 was the last time I saw in their reffing report. So it'll be interesting in that regard. Connor, Andrew, you guys are veterans of this, doing it much longer than we have. How often do you have to bring the ref up when you do your podcast at Holy City Sound Off?
It's not something we often discuss, but it is an interesting way of thinking about it and how to set up your team and how to approach the referee. Me as like a person and as a former player, I always you kind of take your frustrations out on refs, but at the end of the day, they're not going to change their mind or change. You can't pull back the yellow card unless it's to give a red card or something and that's through VAR when we see that typically at the highest level. So at this level of the game, once a call is made, there's really no point in arguing it and putting yourself in a worse position. So I really think it depends on how the coaches themselves are telling their players and reminding them to kind of keep their heads, stay controlled, and don't let the emotions of the moment and of maybe poor decisions, because that's something that every fan likes to kind of tack on is, oh, it's because the ref gave this call around the 18, or that wasn't a penalty when it was. But at the end of the day, the referee is just a part of the game, and you kind of have to adjust to it. So I think approaching the game as in treat the ref as the ref and just go on with the game is the most important thing.
Yeah. I hope that the ref doesn't come out, being that they're new to the playoff atmosphere and the physicality of these two teams in particular when they match up, that the referee can get themselves into a difficult situation very early if they try to be too controlling with the match, where there's early yellows that come out, and then you're looking at a match that has upwards of 9 to 10 yellow cards, or potentially maybe one should have been a second yellow issued because of that's how you've been refereeing the match. I am
Jay Chapman reference. Is that a Jay Chapman reference right there?
No, but I am curious. Did the paying the referee accusations, did those stem from any Lou City fans, or because there's a history
it
of
started with Indy and then it moved on to Lou. And I think if you want to call Coach Connor, I think should be nominated for Coach of the Year for a certain amount of conditions. I don't know if he'll get that, but I will say he's Ambassador of the Year because he brought together Indy and Lou fans to equally complain about us. So he's a peacemaker at this point.
That's awesome. We last season we saw Pierman make comments towards refereeing in Louisville against Louisville due to a late goal being called off for the Battery. So
we've also seen Kano get in trouble for it too. So I don't think that they're giving us any favors. He's been really upset a few times and just not care. I'm going to take this fine. I'm going to call him out on something I don't feel comfortable about. So.
Pull up the freeze frames. You'll always have dirt on anyone accusing you.
I will say, this game's going to be so close. I would never bet on it, even if I was allowed to. But if I could bet on one predictable outcome, it's that Ben Pierman and Connor Smith both get a yellow card in this game. That is the only thing I know to be an absolute truth.
It's a good call.
So let's get into these formations and what we think will be the most likely starting 11. We'll start with Rhode Island FC. On the injury report, we still have Isaac Anking out for the season. Stephen Turnbull, we have not heard anything about his injury, but again, being the WebMD experts that we are, a dislocation of that magnitude still probably puts him out for the remainder of the season. And the fact that the club hasn't announced anything Like, you can play cloak and dagger as much as you want, but I don't expect to see him have made the trip down to South Carolina. So that gives us a starting 11. And this is where it's going to be a little bit of a departure from everything we know, because Coach Cano has been somewhat predictable this year with his primary and his secondary players in each of the positions. And so, Jason, walk us through what we think is most likely going to be the lineup.
Yeah. So as always, El Capitan, Coque Vegas will be in net. And then we're looking at this back three here and thinking we're going to have no Darce, Yao, and Stoneman, some more locked on. Where it starts to get a little different here is with no Jojea Quizera, the question would be who would go out and play that left wing back position? Well, we're thinking it's going to be Morris Dugan. Being the left footer that he is, we've seen him employed over there a few times, and he feels comfortable kind of pushing up, being a strong physical presence, maybe not the exact type of creator, but he does feel comfortable stepping up and trying to engaging and maybe trying to bake up plays. And he's a decent long ball passer as well. That midfield trio is going to stay the same. Mark Ibarra, Zach Caravo, and Clay Holstad. Since Coach Cano has kind of made that changes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Those three are the spine of this team at this point.
Yeah, that's been a real strength of ours in this run that we've been making. And then another slight change here, because we're not going to make too many, we imagine. We're going to see Noah Fuson go out there on that, play a right wing back there, with Steven Turnbull being injured and our options pretty limited, and coach kind of sticking with a core that he's really trusted here in these last few months as RIFC has been surging through the table, picking up wins. Like we said, I don't see too much change here. And then, of course, we're going to see the return of Albert Diqua, Mr. Chico up top to pair with Williams. And then we're thinking at the bench, we'll probably see the return of Gabby Alves to give ourselves some more defensive cover there with Mark Doyle, Jack Paniotu, and who else we got? AST, Kofi Chumesi, Jackson Lee, and Amos Shapiro-Thompson.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. One, we saw Dugan line up pretty well against Nick Marcanic in the last game against these two teams where Jojea wasn't available. So we've seen bits and pieces of this already. The difference now becomes, though, with no Steven Turnbull, Frank Nodarce needs to slot back in so we have a competent back three. But then I like that even more because it really kind of helps lock down Marcanic, where, whether he's out wide trying to find something or he's playing central and trying to make a living nightmare for Coque Vegas, having that kind of additional level of defender, it speaks to where this could happen. Of course, though, to your point, we are sacrificing Noah Fuson then dropping back. I'm not sure that I love that because I feel like JJ Williams has benefited off of the partnership with Noah Fuson. Sometimes when a striker gets hot, you look at the players around him. Noah has a great ability to draw away defenders or make just runs that kind of unlock or destabilize a back line. So I think that makes sense. And then spot on, I think Gabby Alves does make this trip because we saw in the last game that, with the early yellow cards and the gassing of Frank Nodarce just being out of action by the 70th minute, we only had one defender that we could swap on. So we went literally all gas, no brakes, doing nothing but offensive subs. It worked out, but I think that was against a team in Louisville City that couldn't have any answers against us. I don't think we'll get the same results out of Charleston on the day. Before we move on to Charleston, guys, anything that you'd say about that lineup, anything that scares you or keeps you up at night?
I mean, JJ Williams can easily keep someone up, especially an opposing coach at night. So he's going to be the player. But you mentioned Diqua returning. He's someone Golden Boot last year, very capable player. Just give him a window, and it could be deadly. So having those two work together up top is where my eyes focus. And I'm hoping and think that much of the battery side will balance out like the spine and the other areas of the squad.
Yeah, I'd say Coque Vargas is someone that we'll have to keep in mind with in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, being executing on the chances we get. He's someone that's very crucial for your lineup. So goals is something we'll be looking to do, and Coque is very capable of saving plenty of those. So
So if we move on to the Battery, before I throw up a lineup that we made guesstimates on and hoping you can confirm or completely dismantle, curious what players are, on an injury mend themselves or may not make it to the starting 18 on the night because of, any reason that they couldn't be a part of the game day.
Yeah, there's not many that come to mind, luckily, but a big name is going to be Leland Archer. When we were at the match, he was not dressed, so not sure about the severity of that injury. We did see him, being that we got there quite a bit early, we did see him having touches on the ball, working with a coach on the practice pitch, but he was not involved in warm-ups and did not dress. So he's a player that, captain of the team, vet in the squad too. I think probably the longest current tenured player of the Battery. So he's someone that could just really be a difference maker if he is available. And I'm hoping, based on that little bit of footwork and touch work that we saw, that he's going to be. So that would be the one name that comes to mind. And after the match, everyone seemed to be moving well. I don't think there were any heavy knocks picked up in the match. And we haven't heard any additional updates or bad news from training this week.
So then if we get into it, we've got you in a 4-2-3-1. It's been one of Pierman's go-tos this season. Obviously, you've got Adam Grinwis, who's having a light-out postseason. You've got Mark Segbers, Graham Smith, Nathan Dos Santos, and Chris Allen, who maybe we've got that one wrong out of that back four. And then, of course, you've got the lethal duo of Aaron Malloy. I hate that there's a healthy Aaron Malloy in this postseason. Jay Chapman, I hate that he's a Hartford Athletic player. And then you've got that three of Juan Gabriel Torres, Nick Marcanic, Golden Boot winner, and Arturo Rodriguez. And then up front, Jackson Conway. Interesting. We've seen Conway. We've been watching, and I know he's got Pierman's favor right now. But no MD Myers? What's that about? Does this formation look right, or do we think that there's some subtle changes that could happen here?
So, yeah, it looks right. If I were to jump in, this is what they've played the first two playoff matches and heavily relied on. Conway has been the man in favor. I wish when we sat down with Pierman, I asked him about that. He, I think, maybe more so than any other coach in the league, really rides the hot hand and what's working. So if he has that starting 11, until injuries came into play, and once he kind of got that squad that he wanted, I would say for like 2 straight months earlier on in the season, he played the same starting 11, like with very little tweaks. So maybe this is his playoff 11. It does look different than what I would say we're used to seeing. Allen, he can play anywhere as he's showing, but I wouldn't really describe him as that true left back. So if I were to describe just some changes, this would be impending that Leland Archer does return. I think what you would see is, being that there's such a strong duo up top from Rhode Island, having the power and the size from Archer and Smith next to each other would, I would say, be the best center back pairing that we can put together if Leland's healthy. So I think if you saw that, you'd see Dos Santos slide back out in his more favorable left-hand position, left back. He'll play in a slightly advanced role, but I think that would allow Segbers to fly forward more so. Right now, Chris Allen's been that more advanced player. And with that shift, it could change a lot of things in midfield, because Chris Allen is an incredible holding midfielder, can play those like deep driving balls on diagonals. He can pick passes, but he'll also just be a disruptor that like you don't want to go near if you have to get on the ball, because he's going to let you know that he's there. So yeah, to sum it up, if Leland comes in and is indeed healthy, I'd say Dos Santos slides to left back, Allen slides up a block, and then we'd have the luxury to either play Chapman or Malloy in a more advanced role, which would be dangerous. I think Chapman is a class player. He's showed a lot of like intellectual ability on the ball and just seeing passes that I think a lot of other players wouldn't see. But I guess the area of trouble that I come to is, who is Pierman going to pull off if Archer comes in? Arturo has been incredible in the postseason, so I don't know if it would be him. I don't think he's going to pull off that true striker in Conway. He's going to go with either MD or Conway. So I don't know if he'll make the change. I think if he did have to pull one of the attackers, it would be Arturo, just because he didn't see the most regular season minutes out of all the players on the pitch. And I do think he's going to lead with Conway. I wish I asked him more about what led to him making that switch late in the season, because MD had that bucket of goals. Him and Nick together are a pretty deadly duo. If I had to guess on behalf of Coach Pearman why that is, I truly think that he has Conway up there. He's a tenured player as well, being young still for the USL Championship, but just to wear out the defense. The press from him has been relentless. He's a big body to deal with. So I think that Pearman probably feels there's an advantage bringing MD off the bench when that back line has been exhausted a bit. But that's just a guess. So,
it's an educated guess, because that's exactly what you guys did to us to equalize in the last game we faced each other. Myers came in as a sub and blew one past Koke Vegas, where Conway wasn't maybe having as much of a productive game. So I completely agree with you. I think that's spot on. Does that mean Myers is your X factor, or is there another player that would need to kind of represent that? If you have to go to the bench, who's Pearman looking for to be a game changer?
I think Emilio's a player that can come on and really, really impact a game. He's someone that is equally as, he's both relentless and can defend his heart out, but also can drive the ball forward, can pick out a clean pass, can be very creative. So he's kind of got it all when it comes to being a midfielder. So, another player to throw on if Rhode Island are starting to feel the heat, the fatigue, if it goes in the extra time, we have the luxury of the fitness within Myers, within Emilio, to really come on and be a duo to cause a lot of issues. Because Connor kind of talked about who's going to go where. We have seen Marcanic slide out left a lot of the time this season, or right, depending on what Pearman's feeling, who's fit between Arturo and Juan David. But I think that's a potential to get more attacking force on, is maybe taking off the likes of Arturo, putting in Emilio to slide in the middle up front from Allen and Malloy, if it is that midfield duo, and then just having relentless attacking pressure from both Emilio himself and for Myers up top. So it could be interesting to see how these teams shape up, but I'm expecting fireworks either way.
Connor, speaking of fireworks, obviously our club is very familiar. Our fans are very familiar with your Golden Boot winner, plus Aaron Malloy, who I think is the highest rated FOTMOB player for the season. So we know those names. But if you were to ask the average RIFC fan, who should they be watching in this game? Who should they be paying attention to? Who should they be worried about? Not just as an X factor, but just because they're so good at their role that it's going to make it really difficult for RIFC.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm actually going to go with Jay Chapman. He's a player that came in late. You guys might not like that at all, being that he's from Hartford. So maybe it'll get the fan base a little riled up from Rhode Island. But he's a player that does a lot with a little. So you might not necessarily notice it, but I think with this new style that Pearman's led with this season, controlling upwards of 60% possession or more in every match, he has such a calming presence on the ball, and his ability to pick passes in a tightly knit back line, I think could be crucial. I don't think he'll be necessarily playing the full 90, being that Andrew mentioned some of the rotation that could occur. But when he's on the pitch, I think he's someone that can take the sting out of Rhode Island a counterattack just by maintaining possession of the ball and hopefully lulling your back line to sleep. But when he sees it happen, he's going to be there to pick the pass. So that would be a player that might be flying a little bit under the radar aside from the juggernauts of Malloy and Marcanic, but someone to watch.
Sounds similar to RFC's Mark Ibarra in the way that he doesn't always get the plaudits, but he's very comfortable in just, catching the ball and recycling it and continuing possession and being very comfortable to just make those passes under pressure.
He graduated from the school of Bob Lilly, so of course he has to be that good. Andrew, I want to flip this question kind of building off of what Connor just said. Connor mentioned that Ben Pearman's strategy, his style, is a possession-based, it's a domination-based tactic, which kind of matches really well with Kano's vision of high press, playing off the ball, not really caring as much about how much possession is built from this side. Curious how these two teams line up and stack against each other. Is this going to come down to tactics, or is there another player that will be the difference maker? Like, we look at JJ as probably the one that will lift us if we do beyond the semi or beyond the Eastern Conference Final. Is there a player, and is that answer Nick Markanek?
I think it is going to be Nick Markanek who's going to be the X factor or the player to get us out of a pickle if that's where we end up. We saw that against Tampa. He equalized. We saw it against Pittsburgh. He was our goal scorer. I mean, he's at like 31. I think he's at 31 goals right now, postseason 30 goals. I might be a goal off there. So I think it's going to – I think personally, I think when you're this late in the playoffs, when you're in the final for the Eastern Conference, it's a bit of both of like tactics, style, things like that. But also it's – I don't know. There is drama in it as well. So I think you can't really anticipate what is going to lead to a goal or how the goal is going to come, but there's going to be a situation that you can't really explain, and it just unfolds in that way, if that makes sense. Because a player to call out that Connor had mentioned, you mentioned Jay Chapman. I think for me, Juan David Torres has the most raw talent in the entire Charleston Battery squad. I think his first touch, his flair, he's willing to take huge risks in the game. He's been a highlight reel all season long with those goals from the halfway line and catching goalkeepers by surprise. So we could see something like that on both ends. So for me, it's a situation where a bit of both tactics and the drama that playoff soccer gets us. So
speaking of that drama, what's the duel or the player versus player matchup you're either the most excited or most afraid to see?
I'm going to go with, I guess, a bit of both, Markanek and Koke. So, like, you have the most marquee finisher in the league against a goalkeeper who came with a lot of notoriety from San Diego, has been exceptional for Rhode Island this season, and someone who came up big against Louisville last weekend. So I think just having the amount of opportunities Charleston creates for themselves, as I mentioned earlier, and the finishing ability of Nick and the chances he finds himself in, just seeing how that shapes up. I'm going to be scared for Nick's sake and for the team that we might we might get like a shot stopping save where it's a highlight reel on ESPN the next week. But yeah, for me, it's going to be those two matching up.
Connor, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm going to go in our back line, depending what it is. But if JJ Williams is playing off the right, as you guys kind of had it shown, and if it is Dos Santos that Pierman leads with, I don't think he's as comfortable as at center back. So I think that could be a very pivotal matchup to see which shoulder that your strikers play off. If JJ swaps over to the left, I mean, that would be a very incredible matchup to see, like an all-league player and Graham Smith trying to be the guy that puts some cuffs on JJ and just brings him to a halt, because no one's stopping him at the moment. It's just whoever took the lid off that is made a good call. So I think that back line and how they deal with such a player in form, they get to go up against Nick in training every day, so they know how to stop a player from scoring goals. But when momentum's on your side, it takes a huge effort. And if it is Dos Santos and maybe not his natural player, I think that's something that Rhode Island are probably going to key in on and play off of that side much more, make him that point of emphasis, play into Williams' feet as much as they can, and just make him deal with it out of the gate or on a counter.
So then the real question is, because I didn't hear his name yet, what is the likelihood we see a Prince Sadie appearance in this playoff match?
I think you got to put him on if we're up, for the sake of, former player meets, gets a chance to play against Rhode Island. So, for him, realistically speaking, like this season, he hasn't been as impactful as, we were excited about the signing initially just because he has a lot of pace, experience in the USL. We did see him come on and terrorize some back lines with that pace. But if it is down to the wire, if it's still 1-1 or 0-0, I don't see Prince Sadie coming on as a first option. But I think for the fans, it would be kind of cool just to see kind of, they're both in that position. Either team, if he stayed with either team, we both would have been there. So unlikely for me, but you never know.
So then let's get into the business end here. Andrew, we'll start with you. What does the Charleston Battery need to advance on to the Cup Final? What do they need to do to put Rhode Island FC down and end our hopes and dreams?
I think not conceding first, obviously against Tampa, that was something we did. It does put a pin in things, and just I have confidence in this side to crawl back from going down. But I think when you give Rhode Island that opportunity and that advancement in the game, they're going to take it. You guys did it against Louisville City, and it was clear that Rhode Island has the momentum. Like, the momentum's there. They'll hold on to that goal for as long as they can, and I think they're capable of doing it for a full 90. So for me, it's going to be preventing goals from coming in early on, and as I've said all season, being clinical when we get the opportunity. We have the players to put the ball in the back of the net. It's just whether it's on a back post off a corner or a through ball in from Chapman or Malloy, like being clinical in the 18 when we have that opportunity. So for me, it's those two things.
Connor, you're up.
I mean, yeah, a lot of what Andrew said. And containing Rhode Island is not going to be an easy task. I think something that creeps in is the thought of last year's final. So, I mean, Charleston were a high seed in the Eastern Conference. Phoenix, we all know, was, I believe, the 6th seed that entered the final. So that David versus Goliath. And there is going to be a little bit of that comes into play. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the Charleston Battery players are thinking that, of like, oh, we can't take this lower. Like, the seeding means nothing at this point. And then the other thing that's going to be key for the Battery is dealing with the press. I don't think Lou City dealt with it very well. And the identity that Rhode Island has is very much of Charleston of last year. So there is that like bit of familiarity that I see in watching you guys, which is, it's cool to see, but it's not fun to play against. And one poor touch out of the back, who knows? The field's been getting played on quite a bit. So hopefully it looks good and is holding up. But I think that's going to be big, is dealing with the press, because Rhode Island's going to come flying where a mistouch could go wrong. So you got to get comfortable on the ball within the first 3-4 minutes of the match.
Jason, what does Rhode Island FC need to take this inaugural season and make it all the way to the Cup Final?
I think based upon the previous kind of matchups that we've seen between these two teams, this is going to be a little bit more of a tougher test maybe than before our last 2 playoff matches, as it should be. This is the Eastern Conference Finals. Going ahead early, as RIFC has kind of started to make a habit of it, where in the past they were kind of known for scoring late goals, is going to be important to kind of continue that momentum. They're going to need to be lethal, right? When we last saw these two play each other, while I mean, we thought it was admittedly a soft penalty, we didn't take that chance to go ahead and win. We cannot go through this game and not take those chances and leave those opportunities on the table. I think it's important that coach doesn't overthink this. Don't change too much. The momentum is on our side. This team is red hot. Make the few adjustments that you need to based on the players who are not there. But, as we know, Coach Cano is a big fan of Carlo Angelotti. So, I think that the vibes and power of friendship that RAFC have kind of like started to kindle over the last few months, I think can kind of get them over the line.
He's gonna have the eye or the eyebrow raise the whole game.
He may get a second yellow for the eyebrow raise. Who knows? I agree, and I think it's a formula that has proven itself. Scoring first seems to be the smart strategy for either one of these clubs. It's definitely worked for us in both of our games. I think, and that's also not to discount or discredit that while RIFC has suddenly found a way to start scoring in the first half, we still are dangerous in the final 15. We scored again at Lynn Family Stadium in the final 15 minutes. So it's a tale of both halves, really, at that kind of standpoint. But like you said, Charleston's going to be a tough line. That's going to be the toughest test that we faced. This lineup is scary on paper. I mean, you look at the FOTMob ratings alone, and you can say Louisville City had this breakaway season and the most points ever, but look where they are now, right? I think that if Charleston probably had some more health a little earlier in the season, they could have been a contender for the Players' Shield and taking the first seed. I also think that, when you look down at not having the creative weapons that we'll need, that hurts us. Turnbull was lights out in a lot of these big games. He's still out. Jojea not available. It's going to change this game into a very defensive game. I don't think we'll see like 3-2 goal thriller in Manila kind of situation. Ben Pierman is no slouch, and he'll probably be looking, reflecting on the last game and trying to understand how can he activate Marcanic to be more of a contributor in this game, which means that Dugan and Nodarse are going to be put to the test even more than they were on the last bout. I think that this will come down to the same thing that it happened in the last game. I think that whichever team makes the first mistake will lose. I look back at how RIFC kind of let the last match get away from them, similar almost to a Memphis 901 FC game, RIP. But yeah, I look at the goal that MD Myers cleaned up. Koke, if he had either deflected that out or just kept his hands on it, that probably wasn't going to be a goal. And then likewise, we were gifted with the softest penalty of the year. And you're hearing this from Rhode Island fans. That was not a penalty in that game. and we couldn't convert it, right? And we've had conversion problems. So I think that this is going to be a tough test. What I am the most scared about for both of these teams is that this drags out into a 0-0 or like a 1-1 after extra time and we go to penalties. And I'm sorry, guys, but both of our teams are not great at putting away penalties in extra time. So I'm concerned. I don't want this game to go to that. I want a dramatic finish on one side or the other. I don't want it to go to a penalty shootout. But I will say this: whichever one of our two teams wins this game, they win the entire thing. I am not convinced that anyone in the West has the ability, the stamina, or the skill set to best either one of these teams on their greatest day. The only difference is that if Charleston wins, they get the home seed, whereas if we win, we still do this away. So we have more problems ahead. Speaking of winning percentages, which don't mean anything because we're in playoff now. So like all of these teams are hot. All of these teams have won multiple games. But, the USL Tactics, John Morrissey, has this at a 55% home favored odd for Charleston winning. Rhode Island, though, right on the heels at 45%. And then if you want to pay attention to the West Coast, Vegas has some work to do at just a 37% outcome to pull it all off. I looked at FOTMob's ratings, and the fans have spoken. They think 55% will see that Rhode Island FC wins, 42% that it's in Charleston Battery's favor, 3% draw. Again, I love the people that just say, hey, Rhode Island draws, so they'll somehow find a way to draw in playoff soccer. Andrew, we'll start with you. What are your score predictions for this game?
I'm going to go 2-1 Charleston Battery in extra time. Andrew,
you're up.
Yeah.
Sorry. Apologies, Connor. Yeah, my bad. It's been a long day.
No worries. Yeah.
Matt, I have to disagree. I think it could be a thriller and the wheels could come off. I'm going to go 3-2 to the Battery. And I do think it'll end in extra time as well.
I mean, let's get honest, guys. If it's 3 goals, only one player in this postseason is going to be able to put up a hat trick, and it's JJ Williams. So
Good point.
Jason, what do you got?
Struggling here as we're finishing this off. Yeah, it's been a long day. I'm gonna go with 2-1 RIFC. I think it's going to be a tough match, and because I don't want it to go that long, not because I don't want to enjoy it, I think we're going to finish it off in 90.
Ooh.
I hope so. I've also got 2-1 RIFC. I do think that one team scores early and then it becomes just a slugfest, but I think that we see this in regular time. And I think that it's going to come off the backs of the red hot JJ Williams and maybe some sneaky deaky goals from Chico. I can't see these guys not, if they can get the service, I can't see them not finding the net in this matchup. So it's going to be crazy, guys. I cannot thank you enough for joining us. Before you go, I want to just throw up on the screen for those that are coming to the actual game. Super excited. I'll be down there. There's something like 70 fans traveling that we've got confirmed. So there's going to be a strong support for Rhode Island at this game. But if you can't make it to Patriots Place, there will be the watch party at the Guild in Pawtucket. Guys, you may want to just come down and watch from there. You can wear your Charleston kits. I'm sure you'll be well received. And this game this game will be at 7 p.m. And if you can't make it to the Guild to see your favorite Charleston podcasters, you can watch this game at home on ESPN Plus. So, Andrew, Connor, the floor is yours. We didn't get to give you a proper introduction because someone had technical difficulties. And then also we were just run into the middle of this. But if you want to just kind of give a quick, excerpt about who you guys are, the multiple podcasts that you do, and also, most importantly, where can fans find you guys and start following? Because I have to admit, when we started our podcast, the first thing we did is we did research around the league, and you guys have been one of the powerhouses, not just in the USL, but also just making sure that soccer gets the right awareness and the right media attention that it deserves, and you do it at the highest level. Your Hearts of Pine episode was one of my favorites so far of the season, and I can't thank you guys enough for all the hard work that you guys do.
Matt and Jason, thank you so much for first off having us, and then for the kind words. We're all in it for the one thing, which is growing the game in the U.S. and maybe two things: just making connections and enjoying the ride while it's here. So, a bit about us and kind of how we were founded. We started this in the Howlers podcast, which is our main podcast, about 4 years ago during COVID. Got together covering mostly Premier League soccer. And then over the last 2 years, we've shifted into USL, grassroots, home base US footy. So willing to have conversations with anybody, any podcast, any player, coach, person in the game, business related, anything. So that's kind of been the goal thus far for the Howlers podcast. And then in the midst of growing in the USL, we got the opportunity to work with the Charleston Battery and kick off Holy City Sound Off, which we've been doing for about 2 seasons now, or just under that. And yeah, we love doing these. We love sitting down with other teams and other supporters groups and chatting everything about the matchups, predictions, lineups, things like that. So a lot of changes coming everyone's way for the Howlers podcast, which I think everyone will be excited about. So please keep an eye out for that. You can find us at the Howlers podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok as well. And then Holy City Sound Off you can find on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Twitter, and Instagram. So go ahead and check that out when you get a chance. And thank you for supporting us.
No, definitely. Everyone should be following. These guys are incredible. Connor, before we read our final lines here, what's the final word?
Up the Battery.
This is how you don't get re-invited back to our show, gentlemen.
I mean, hey, big surprise. Fans of team back their team, right?
Yeah.
That was great, Connor. That was great. Connor, anything to add on what I said? Am I missing anything?
Rhode Island fans, go check. We did visit and the Charleston v. Rhode Island match. It was a rainy away day for the Battery, but on the Howlers YouTube page that there is a video of us attending the match, which was a lot of fun, and we hope to do it again at the true home park next season.
Yeah, and I mean, knowing how close you are in proximity, you have no excuse but not to. So
We'll be there. We'll be there.
the carpet is rolled out. Maybe, I don't know. After that last comment, I don't know. I don't know.
Our faces
But-
are going to be up. No.
Battery jersey.
You may be on a tifo now next time around, so be careful. But in the meantime, Jason, get us out of here.
All right, guys, make sure to check out our friends over at the Blazing Musket for all of your New England soccer coverage, including RIFC, and that's at theblazingmusket.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Threads, and TikTok at RIFC Podcast, Instagram at Raising Anchor, and then we got that website, raisinganchorpodcast.com. Anchor's up, Matt.
Anchors up the tide. Let's go get this win, and we will catch you guys all later.
Thanks, Garner and Andrew.